Okay, so the next point that we want to see is about theme of responsibility here, and how this novel deals with this idea of theme of responsibility. Obviously, quite early in the story, we get this quote, which gives us a kind of a signal towards the point of responsibility. That so I shall have to be careful. When I tell my story to you, I have to be careful. Well, I have learned to become careful over the years. Means he was not so careful earlier, as careful now as I was careless then. Or do I mean carefree? Can a word have two opposites? Now, this itself gives us a signal that even on the point of responsibility, our protagonist will try to play on that. Whether it is he who is to be blamed for his carelessness, or was it his carefree life? So, how this question of responsibility is unfolding in this novel, or how these debates are given, that we want to see here. So, when we look at this point of responsibility, the point that we need to discuss here are something like this: the question of responsibility. Paul Roberts, who is our narrator here, uh, who is questioning all this thing. So, how Paul Roberts is talking about this question of responsibility. We know that his life has a tragedy as such. At the age of 70, he is not happy with his life. And what has happened is the relation, one important relation, and he tells the only story about that relation to us. But is he taking the responsibility of that or not? Obviously, it is not easy for anybody to take a responsibility of the things when the ship is not reaching home, or when the ship is sinking in between, or when an aeroplane meets with a crash, or a relationship meeting with a crash or sinking down. It is very difficult for people to take responsibility in that case also. And then what people do, they blame others. Normally, people blame others. So how is Paul blaming the other? So one of the important thing that Paul finds to blame here is domestic violence by Gordon MacLeod. And this is what is giving a gap or a space to Suzanne to have a relation with Paul. So you would say that if Gordon is good with Susan, if Gordon is not misbehaving with Susan, then Susan perhaps may not have a kind of an urge to build a relation with somebody who is so young, that is 19 years of age. Then perhaps that might not happen. So that is how we try to discuss about the life, that is the life between Gordon and Susan in detail in our narration also. But when we talk about responsibility, what Paul tells us, the thing, we have to add one more thing to this, and that is we go back to the novel, The Sense of an Ending. And in this novel, also there is the question of responsibility being discussed there. And in this novel, Julian Barnes himself talks about the point of responsibility. And he gave a metaphor. In that novel, he has given a metaphor of link. Link means if there is a chain, then it is made up of several links. A chain is made up of several links. He gives this metaphor. He says, But all these links, when we see these links, let me just check whether it is okay. So when we see this chain and this links, then what becomes significant here? Now imagine that one link is breaking here. One link is breaking here in between. But what or who is responsible for that? So the chain idea will say that in the breaking of a chain, where lies the chain of responsibility also? Where lies the chain of responsibilities? What are the possibilities? What are the possibilities in this? So we can say that the possibilities are something like all these chains are made up of, say, different metal, made up of different metal. So the making of the chains or the links also plays a vital role. So if a chain or a link is made up of a good strong metal, then it will not break. But then if it is made up of weaker metal, then it will break. Then at the same time, this metal and a kind of a frangibility. There is a kind of a separate frangibility with all these links also. Some links may stretch a little bit, their shape may be distorted, but still it will not break. Whereas some very quickly will break down, will not be able to suffer a little bit of pull also in this reference there. So when we see this, and apart from the making of the chain or the link in terms of its frangibility and the quality of metal there, and it's we call it that it's lachilapan. It's how this fragile or frangibility will make, because we know that if we have that lachilapan, then the shocks can be absorbed. The shocks in the life can be absorbed. But if we are not that having frangibility, then perhaps we may break. We give another metaphor of that when there are heavy winds, cyclone, then even the long trees can sustain if they will little bit bow down or they will swing with the air. But if they will not swing, then they will break. So what sustains trees in cyclone? Their frangibility. They will swing for a while, but if they will be standing very strong, then they may break down. They will damage themselves also. Another metaphor we can say, or another image we visualize, is that a snake passing through some kind of a place where there are tools lying. That was, imagine that is a place of a carpenter, and there are various kinds of ozar of carpenter which may be having a kind of a sharpened things there, like seesaw, karvat padi hoy, and then the snake takes a round over that. એના ઉપર કદાચ સ્નેક ચાલતા ચાલતા વિટરાઈ જાય છે અથવા ત્યાં એને થોડું લાગે છે, અને જો એની સાથે ઝઘડો શરૂ કરે અને વિટરાઈને વધુ જોર કરે તો સ્નેકનું શું થાય? એ પોતાના જ કટકા કરી નાખશે. It will damage. That is perhaps the only thing is that the snake would have to go from there rather than be angry with that tool and start fighting and wriggling, because what is the way of snake's way to fight with the enemy? It will wriggle around. It will take a round and it will try to crush the object with the power of his body. Now if that is what the snake is going to do with karvat, then it is going to cut itself into pieces. So even that plays a vital role, frangibility of metal and other things. But apart from that, from where is the pull coming? From where is the pull coming? For example, if this has to break, this link has to break, was the pull from here? Was this the link that was pulling, or it was this link that was pulling? or it was this that was pulling, or it was this that was pulling. From where was the pull coming? That the particular link got damaged, or how far this damaged link can see from where the pull is coming. Perhaps that link can only see here, or at the most here. It cannot see the entire chain which goes into eternity, which goes into, this chain goes into eternity. So the one who is damaged, one who is broken, how far one can see from where the pull came. Apart from, I have to see whether I am, what is the making of my metal, what is my frangibility. That is one thing. And apart from that, do I blame the person whom I am able to see, that because of this that happened? Can I see beyond that what happened to that person? And then so the pull came to me, and this link was only there, lying there inevitably. It is just lying there inevitably. The pull was coming from this, or maybe this link also was lying there inevitably. The pull was coming perhaps from here or from here. You never know. So these are the points which Julian Barnes discusses in The Sense of an Ending. And the way people see that, well, I am damaged by this, so I will damage that person. I am damaged by this, so I will damage that person. But well, are you sure that the damage came from that person? Was he also not a part of a link in a larger chain of responsibilities? And so that happened in a given context or other thing. How far can we see? Very difficult to see that also. The same kind of an attempt here Paul also is doing. Paul also tries to visualize or tries to question the point of responsibility in a different way. So both the novels, as many critics have observed, that there are lots of ideas that are there in Sense of an Ending are again repeatedly coming in this novel, The Only Story also. And that again is something significant about this question of responsibility. And that is something very important. Even when we ask you that how can you give or talk about this learning outcome that you have to write this. So one of the learning outcome is this, that how we understand our responsibilities in life, or how do we understand the damages in life. We are damaged by so many people, but do we blame, or blame again is a part of that responsibility, just we put responsibility on that person, or we try to see it in a much larger context, that how one can visualize. So that can help us. That can be a learning outcome from literature, that we try to see that where lies the question of responsibility. And ultimately at the end, either in The Sense of an Ending or in The Only Story, what happens importantly is that when you are there to like make a justice on life, justice, you are like a judge, and you are telling that, well, this happened and these people are punishable, they should be sent to jail, but most of them might have already left the earth, so there is no chance of sending anybody to jail. But you will have to tell that this person was guilty, like you will see here, Gordon is guilty because he is doing all these things. So you have to put guilt on this, that, and other thing there. What Julian Barnes wants to tell us through both this narrative in the question of responsibility is that when we sit down to do our swadhyayan, or when we try to do introspection inside, at that time it is very important to see what is your role in all these things. Where do you stand? Where you are there. If you think you are broken, but your being broken, being in a state of brokenness, also might have damaged both of these also. Because you are broken, you might have damaged the entire chain. You have broken the entire chain because you were not having a metal to face the thing. You were not having frangibility. And so you are blaming these two links, but you have actually broken the entire relation between the entire chain. Why don't you read that you are not having a proper metal or frangibility? And so you are responsible for so many relations being shattered. The entire chain is broken by you. The chain of relations are broken by you. Why don't you see that? So when we do introspection or when we do swadhyayan, it is very important to see what is my role rather than what is others' role. We have to blame ourselves rather than others. We have to take responsibility on ourselves rather than putting that tokery of responsibility on others. That is very important. Maybe publicly we won't be able to do that. Publicly we can't do that, but maybe when we talk with self, all these narrations, like Tony Webster's narration in the sense of an ending, or Paul Roberts' narration here, they are self-talks. They're talking with self, as if they are just giving us a kind of an entry into the memory of these characters. And then we are reading that those memories. It is talking with self that is very significant here. So at least then, in our swadhyayans, in our introspections, we have to take a blame on ourselves. The narrator has to take a blame on self. That is the question of responsibility, the way it is discussed here. So when you prepare your answer, when you look at or when you want to write the answer in detail, you have to go to the original text and you have to search in the original text all the references to responsibility. Search all the references to responsibility. And where and how these things are referred to give a textual evidence. One thing I never swerved means going back, means many times he tells that, well, I was not keeping diary, and then he told that I am keeping a diary. So that is turning back to what he has said. So one thing I never swerved, one thing which I have never taken back or eaten my words back, was the certainty that Gordon MacLeod's behavior was a crime of absolute liability, and his responsibility was also absolute. A man hits a woman, a husband hits a wife, a drunkard hits a sober spouse. There was no defense, no possible mitigation. It would never come to court that middle class England had 1,000 ways of avoiding the truth, that respectability was no more shared in public than clothes, the fact that Susan would never accuse him to any authority, not even a dentist. All this had no relevance to me except sociologically. Well, the dentist reference, once he is taking Susan to a dentist in a city. And then she told him that you stay in the car, I will just meet a doctor and come back. And then when the doctor is asking what happened to the teeth, it was obviously bitten by, it was hard hitting by Gordon. But you won't tell that to doctor also. We'll always tell that, well, she slipped off and got the injury there. So that is that reference here. The man was as guilty as hell, and I would hate him until the end of his days. So this is how he is initially trying to put the blame on Gordon. And so would say that, well, it is because of this that Susan was having a gap in terms of Lacan's gap. And so I was there to fill that gap. If Gordon was good, then nothing would happen. So that is how he writes about Gordon. But again, later on when he thinks about the things, he obviously will say that, well, you can't just blame Gordon. You have to take responsibility on yourself also there. So question of responsibility, that is what he tells and says that seemed a matter for outsiders. Only those with a sufficient lack of evidence and knowledge could confidently apportion blame. He was, even at this distance, still far too involved to do so himself. And he had also reached the stage in life where he had started pursuing counterfactuals. So earlier, what were the facts for him? Now he is going to counter all those facts. That is counterfactual. And then he obviously will see his own initials in this chain of responsibilities. He will always find that, well, still with whatever excuses I give and put this responsibility on anybody else, I still am there to play a very vital role in the damage that happened to either his life or Susan's life or anybody also. So it is not only that Susan was unhappy and sent to mental asylum, but it was the parents also who were unhappy. It was also the Gordon and the daughters also who were unhappy. So there were so many people who had suffered because of what Paul has done. And Paul cannot put that responsibility only on Gordon. Gordon may be responsible, But in Gordon's story, when Gordon will do swadhyayan, when Gordon will introspect, then Gordon will say, I am responsible. But it is not Paul who should say, Gordon, you are responsible. Neither the Gordon should say that, Paul, you are responsible. When we do introspection, we have to say that what is my fault? Where things went wrong because of me. That is ultimate question of responsibility that the novel tries to say here. So these quotes will help you in writing your answer when you discuss this point here. Okay? So that is about responsibility, the theme of responsibility here. Okay?